We started studying about John Wayne Gacy last week, and one of the big things that they used for evidence to help convict him was the hair that was found in the trunk of his car. So we watched the videos about how hair and fiber evidence was collected and utilized, how it was analyzed in those 3 cases in the video. I don't think we completely finished the video, but we're not going to finish those at this point. So in terms of our studies for each unit, what I'm doing is I'm making up these fact sheets. These we're just going to use in class. This isn't for you to take with you. We're just going to pull them out and use them whenever we need to use them. Okay? We're going to be focused on this top part today. And so one of the things that we know about hair evidence is that it's considered trace evidence. Trace evidence means that it is a small amount. It's likely invisible. And it's usually transferred as a result of physical contact. That transfer is known as Locarfd's exchange principle. And so that's listed on your fact sheet as well, up at the top. And Locarfd's exchange principle states that any contact between 2 people results in the transfer of trace evidence. So the more aggressive the situation, the more evidence that would be transferred. We also learned that hair is considered class evidence. Well, what exactly does that mean? It means that the evidence itself points to a group of people, not a single individual. If it was pointing to a single individual, it would be direct or individual evidence. Okay? So individual evidence versus class. Hair is definitely class. So we're going to be looking at a variety of different things this week. But to begin with, I wanted to show you how to actually collect the evidence without contaminating it. So I'm going to need a helper. Griffin, would you stand up and help me just because you're right there?
Okay.
Okay. You stand right here next to me. So on the lab sheet that you have in front of you, it's titled Locarfd's exchange principle. Please be sure that you read that introduction. Edmund Locarfd happened to be the very first person to set up a crime lab. I believe it was in 1910. Am I right on that? And it was in France. And they basically gave him like this attic. And all he had was a microscope and a spectrometer. So something that could, it shoots light waves through whatever solution you put in the tube and you put in the spectrometer.
Nay.
Perfect, thank you. And then it would determine the density in terms of how much light can pass through. And that then you can use that to analyze and compare samples to determine if a particular liquid was present or whatever at a crime scene. So Locarfd ended up becoming very, very famous for several different cases that were widely publicized at that time, one of which being there were some coins that were stolen. And he said, bring me in the suspect's clothing. He took their clothing, he ended up finding metal fragments on the clothing and the stolen coins, tested it, and underneath the microscope, he identified that they were of the exact same metal. So because he had that class evidence, it didn't take long, and those suspects ended up saying, yep, we did it. So they admitted to the crime. So that was kind of the onset of looking at trace evidence and starting to collect it. So what you are going to do, in a little bit, you're going to do a reflection there on the front. You're going to think about everything that you have had physical contact with since the moment you got up this morning and got dressed, which could be a lot. Thank goodness you're not 7th hour. Sorry, 7th hour. And so you want to look at who have you been in contact with? What have you been in contact with? Where have you been? And since you've all been to lunch, that could be quite a few people in quite a few places. So any kind of a contact. If we were to shake hands, hi Griffin.
Hi.
If somebody took my hand and swabbed it right now, there might be dead skin cells from Griffin on my hand that then we could get DNA from. Right? You see a friend in the hallway, oh, and you give them a hug. Is it possible that there are fibers from their clothing that transferred? Hair that transfers. I know my hair comes out nonstop. If you have animals at home, even if you didn't pet the animal this morning, is it possible that you have that hair evidence on your clothing? Or on your backpack or purse? okay? So I want you to think about that first, but how do you actually lift? You're gonna need two things today. Packing tape. It's really scientific, right? Just go to the store, get packing tape. And white spot paper. I use recycled paper, so don't use the side that has any typing on it. Use the all white side. By putting the tape on the white paper, it makes it much more visible to be able to see stuff that's on there. And you will probably see things with the naked eye that you might not, like looking at Griffin's shirt, you might not say, oh yeah, he's got fibers from so-and-so on there. Well, we don't know that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna lift off of his shirt to begin with. So you're gonna take the packing tape. Now remember that tape is static. It has static. And so it will adhere as soon as you release this and cut it, it's gonna fly, right? And what's the biggest issue with working with tape?
Sticks to your hands.
Or sticky side goes to sticky side and then you can't use it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my forefinger up at the top. I'm getting ready and I'm gonna rip this off and now I'm gonna let it kind of static clink adhere to the rest of my hand. I just washed my hands so it's not adhering too much. So now I know that it's not, if I bring my hand, like if I lift my finger up, now I can hold on to it. And as long as I leave my hand there, now I'm ready to set that down and touch it on the ends. Make sure you hold the tape on the ends because as soon as you let go, like you can see where your fingerprint is, and we aren't looking at fingerprints right now. We want to find out what evidence we can get off of his shirt. So Griffin, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Have you been seated anywhere where you would have leaned back and maybe picked up any fibers from upholstery or anything like that?
Probably.
So we should turn around, and we need to turn so that way you're facing the back of the room so everybody else can see what I'm doing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place this on your back. I'm gonna do your upper back, okay? So I'm gonna place it right here, and then I'm gonna rub on it. That's all I have to do. So make sure if you're helping a partner that this is in a school appropriate place. Yes? You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So there's one. Now, have you given anybody a hug today?
No.
Okay, first hour I had somebody who'd given a hug. So I said, well, which way did you lean in? Did you go this way or did you go this way? Where is it more likely that there would be transfer evidence, maybe from somebody's hair? So I would like, what you should do is you should actually take from multiple areas. I'm gonna go from the side on his sleeve, and then let's go like along the shoulder, like that, and peel it off. Now, there should be evidence on there. Now, I take my white spot paper, and I'm gonna let it stick right to it. I'm gonna fold the edges back, and this is called a lift, L-I-F-T, right? The tape is lifting any evidence. This should be labeled now, my initials, what I lifted off of, so shirt, and today's date and the time of the lift. I have to document always what is the evidence that I'm collecting and when was it actually collected and by who. Okay, so thank you, Griffin, that's all I needed from you. If you flip over to the back side where there's a table on your lab, you'll notice that you are lifting off of multiple things. For sure, everybody in class has a top and a bottom piece of clothing right now. You better, you're in school, right? Do not use undergarments, okay? You're gonna lift at least off of a shirt and your bottom, whatever that is. Now, beyond that, what can you lift off of? What else might have trace evidence on it? If you walked around in socks this morning before you put on shoes, so if you're wearing socks and shoes, I would take your shoes off and lift off of the sole of your sock. If you have just shoes on, or if you have socks and shoes, either way, you could definitely lift off of the bottom of your shoe. Even flat leather shoes, you know, like the fancy sandals, you're probably gonna pick up something. There's gonna be sand particles, dirt particles, okay? Who knows what we'll find on there. This is more about collecting the lift right now than necessarily about hair evidence. But let's say you were gonna lift off of your backpack. Where would you lift off of your backpack as an other source of where you've been today?
Maybe the bottom because you set it on the floor.
Probably the bottom because you set it on the floor. So your backpack is an option. If you have a sweatshirt on or like a zippered jacket type thing, You could certainly do your shirt underneath and your sweatshirt. If you have two tops on, do them both. See what the comparison is. If you've got, I don't think anybody in this particular hour does, but like sometimes girls wear scarves. You could lift off of a scarf. You could lift off of a headband. I had somebody ask if they could lift off of their lanyard. Why not? So on the back, you're trying to get as many samples of lifts off of your clothing as possible. Then you're going to utilize the stereo microscopes. The stereo microscopes have two lights, one that shines from the base up and one that shines from the top down. Only use the top down. Once you place the lift on there and you turn the light on, it's not plugged in, but you turn the light on, then the light shines down on the fibers, and you don't have any conflicting evidence with like any typing from the bottom. You know what I'm saying? If there's light coming from the bottom, you'll see the typing on the back side of the paper, and that gets confusing. On the back, the types of things that you're going to record are going to include a brief sketch of the fibers and other particles that are present on that lift. And then you are going to, it says count the number of fibers. That's not the total number. How many different types of fibers are you actually seeing? The rest of it, I think, is self-explanatory. So if you don't have any other questions, flip back to the reflection piece. Write down now, where have you been? Who have you been in contact with? What might be sources of trace evidence that you have on your clothing?